relationships look different now more than ever. The current circumstances we all find ourselves in have taken a huge toll on the relationships around us, even the closest ones. How do we restore those relationships, and what is God's plan for us when it comes to our connection with Him and others? Let's find connection in the midst of change.
So 4 years ago, my life completely changed in the midst of a single moment. I remember 4 years ago, my wife and I, we had packed our bags, we had gotten in the vehicle very frantically, and we're on our way to the hospital. We arrive in our room and get everything situated. The doctors are checking out my wife, trying to make sure everything's okay and figure out what to do next. And I'm just anxiously waiting, trying to figure out what this is even going to be like or feel like. And out of nowhere, they tell us that it's time and our baby boy is going to arrive. Some complications happened, things didn't go as planned, and so they throw us into this emergency room and we're trying to figure it out, and all of a sudden, out pops this little boy. And this little boy would change my life and my wife's life forever. Because of the fact I had never held a child before in my own arms, I was freaking out going, what am I going to do? But then I just look into his eyes, and this is our firstborn son, Sawyer. And I was like, you know what? No matter what, buddy, we're going to figure this thing out. I don't care how hard it's going to be. I don't care if dad doesn't know what he's doing. I just know that for the rest of my life, I'm going to spend loving you, and this is going to be a relationship that I will never forget. And it was crazy because after that moment, we then are holding this little boy. A few days go by. They tell me to go pull the car up. So I pull the car up to the hospital and getting ready. My wife's coming down and, they give us the baby to put in the car seat. And I get in the vehicle and then I'm like, wait a second, you guys aren't coming with us? And so the doctors and nurses are staring at us. And I remember going, oh no, you can't leave us with this thing. We have no idea. This can't be legal, right? Like, there's no way I know how to take care of this child. And I'm freaking out, like, I don't know what I'm going to do, how I'm going to handle this moment, what I'm going to do moving forward. Like I said, I had never held a baby into this point, and now this little dude is mine, and I'm going to have to figure out what to do. And so we get home, and you just kind of figure it out, don't you? You kind of start doing some of the things that your body's just trained to do from our Creator. And I just remember in that moment, becoming a parent was such a big deal. And it changed the course of my life and my wife's life forever. And I just remember trying to figure out, how am I going to be the dad? How are we going to be the parents that this little boy needs? And I remember very quickly adapting to that situation. And now what's crazy, some 40 years later, we have two kids. We have Sully and Sawyer. Check out these little dudes. Little baby's not so much a baby anymore. They grow up so fast. And this is our 4-year-old Sawyer, and this is our 2-year-old Sully. And it's crazy to see how our parenting and our lives have changed over the last few years with them in our lives. It's been quite a roller coaster, and there's never a dull moment in our house because of these two young boys around. And I know for me, and I know for you, if you've ever experienced this moment as a parent, you want to get it right. Like, you really want to raise these kids the way that God intended you to raise them. But sometimes you just don't know where to start, or you don't know what to do. And you're trying to figure out what in the world is God's plan for these kids and you as parents. And so today, we continue our series called RelationShift. And we've been looking at these important relationships that we have in our lives and trying to reconnect to them again. The first week, we talked about our relationship with God and what that looks like and how to reconnect that relationship. We also last week talked about the idea of marriage and dating and our relationships and how to get that right and reconnected the way it should be. And today, we're going to look at the big relationship of parenting. Because if you've been a parent this year, things have changed, haven't they? things are different. And we were left trying to pick up the pieces in the midst of this pandemic going, what do we do in the midst of all this chaos that's around us? Continue to raise our kids and do the best that we can for them. And a lot of us are still trying to figure that out to this day. And I was trying to describe and find a word that really fits not just parenting, but our relationships in general. And I came across this word shift, and here's what it means. A shift is to exchange for or replace by another, to change. Or to change the place, position, or direction of, to move. Or to make a change in a place. And so for me, this word described my year. And hopefully you can relate to it as well. And it describes your year when it comes to those closest to you and around you. Like you want to be reconnected to them again. You want to find common ground. You want to figure out because you know how important relationships are in your life. That God did not create us to be in isolation. He created us to be in relationship with one another. But of course, it shifted. And we're all trying to figure out how to manage that shift and that tension in our lives. And so today, we're going to talk about how this works in the life of parenting. Because most of us have been stuck inside with our kids more than ever. Any parents been stuck inside for a really long time with your kids and you feel like you're about to go to the cuckoo house? Anybody feel that way? I know I have over the last few months. Parents' job descriptions completely changed overnight. You went from just being mom and dad to being working stay-at-home parents, to being PE teachers, to being referees, to being craft time creators, doomsday preppers. Like all this happened in the midst of a few moments. And you're trying to figure out how do you be a parent in the midst of all this change? Without notice, there was no more sports. There was no getting out of the house to hang out together. There was no other kids coming over to play with your kids. There's no other parents to talk to or walk through some of this with. It just caused us all to really buckle up and survive. And that's been our last 15 months as parents, is buckling up and surviving the best we could. The problem now is reconnecting and adjusting to all the change that's taken place. And a lot of us have developed some bad habits during this time as individuals, but also as parents. And it's now for us to try to evaluate all of those things that have taken place and figure out, are those things we want in our lives moving forward? And it doesn't matter how far you are in this parenting journey. Maybe you want to be a parent one day. Maybe you're a co-parent or divorced parent. Maybe, you're just got married. Maybe, you've had kids and now you have grandkids. No matter where you are on the spectrum of parenting, I hope today you find something encouraging and helpful for you no matter where you may be at, because I think all of us need some help when it comes to this area, because a lot of us are just trying to figure out what we do and how we move forward. I think one country song describes the relationship with parenting so well, because for me, I don't know about you, I got a lot of advice when we first became parents. Some of it was unsolicited, like, oh my gosh, you're attacking me with all of your advice, and that's great, but I kind of want to figure out how to be a parent too. And some of it was so needed and wanted because we found parents that we really looked up to and we really admired and got some great advice. But everybody said across the board, just hang in there because it goes by so fast. And I'm in the midst of changing poopy diapers and watching myself just crumble because I had no sleep, and I'm drinking coffee that I never drank before to try to stay awake. And I'm like, what do you mean it goes by fast? This is the slowest thing that I've ever experienced in my life. When is this torture ever going to end? But then I think the words of this country song by Old Dominion ring true. Here's what they said. The days will be long, but the years will fly right by. And I have found that to be so true in the midst of me being a parent. The days are long. Sometimes they just feel like they're never going to end. But 4 years ago, it felt like yesterday when we were sitting in that hospital room having our first son. And so if that's true of the years that we have, and it's true of the days that we have, how do we make the most of them? James, a writer of our New Testament, tells us this about our lives. He says this, yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you're a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. How encouraging is that as a parent, right? Like, I'm here for a little bit, I'm gonna raise these kids and I'm gonna vanish? Like, there is no hope in that. But the truth is, you and I, we get a very small amount of time to be incredible influence to the children in our care. And I don't care where you find yourself on that spectrum, but you have an opportunity to influence more than you ever have before. And it's important to remember how quick life can go by so that we can make the most of the time that we do have. One book I was reading as I was preparing for this message this week asked a very good question, and I think it's a good question all of us as parents or wherever you find yourself in as a parent. The question is this, and this is what I want us to spend the time talking about today, is what am I going to do with the time that I have left with my children? What am I going to do with the time that I have left with my children? I remember when I was reading that book this week, it just felt like that question popped out to me because I do want to make the most of the time that I have with my kids. And I know you want to make the most of the time that you have with your kids, no matter how old they are, or your grandkids, or wherever you find yourself at right now. But how do we do that? And especially, how do we do that in the midst of everything that we just went through? Because a lot of us, if we're honest, just want to break. We want to break from it all because it's just been so overwhelming. And it's hard to see the blessing in the midst of the chaos. And so today, that's what we're going to spend our time exploring together. And I wish I could cover every topic of parenting. I wish we could go through everything that I've learned just even this week, reading all the books that I've read. But I just want to spend the next few moments talking about how to reconnect and re-engage as parents. And we're going to go through this very quick, but I hope today that you find something that you can latch onto, maybe a piece of encouragement, maybe a word that speaks to you, maybe a Bible verse that, latches onto you, or whatever it may be, but that would be helpful and encouraging to you as a parent. And I thought, more than anything, it's just good to have people around you to realize that you're not in this alone. And my wife and I found this very true this year when we were in a small group here at Atlee. And small groups were different. They were online, but we met with about 12 other couples, and we just spent time talking, hanging out, reconnecting with each other, talking about how hard parenting was. And I asked some of them to share their story with you today so that you can get an idea of what they've been through, and maybe it'll help you with what you're going through as well. So take a look at this video.
The biggest challenge is just figuring out how to keep them busy, keep them out of trouble, and also try to not constantly push them towards a screen. Even though we did that plenty, we had to buy a trampoline at one point. One of our church friends was able to help us find a trampoline.
Yeah, that made a big difference.
That made a huge difference in our family's life.
So getting through the winter was pretty tough too.
Yeah.
It's hard for the kids to go outside and have a good time. The getting dark so early, everybody was starting to get cabin fever, couldn't really go anywhere. TV screens are the easiest thing to turn to in that sort of scenario. We have to actively work to get out of it. It's real easy just to start looking at the phone, looking at whatever Twitter feed or
it's
whatever,
real easy to just get out of the driver's seat of your life and to just get in the passenger seat and let media drive.
Yeah.
It's very easy because it's always got something for you to look at. It's always got something for you to process.
Always something shocking and
yeah. So it's really important that in parenting and in marriage that we get in the driver's seat and we make decisions.
Parenting.
I'd say that a lot of time together is a good thing. We've had to come up with some unique ideas of what we could do together that was different, because we really didn't spend much time together. No sports, there's no sports at all. So that was tough for us to get used to, and we had to come up with new ideas of what to do.
And the positive from that would be finding new things to do as a family. So exploring some parks, having a family game night. That was all nice. But I think the negative is trying to live up to the expectations of everyone. So you'd see people posting so much on Facebook about their perfect family. and trying to live up to those expectations, and finally realizing that what's perfect for one family isn't perfect for our family.
Right.
And we wanted to make sure that we weren't having mandatory fun, but actually having fun. And so as far as parenting goes, it's been great having more time, but it's time with preteen and teenager, and I don't know that that's really always good for either side. So I like the memories we've made, but I certainly can't say that there hasn't been times where we fought more just being together, and that can be a little frustrating.
Almost together too much.
Exactly.
Well, I know one of the positives, we got to spend a lot more time with Jude especially. And then Joel comes along in July of a pandemic, so we were able to spend a lot more time with him in the very beginning than we would have.
And we got to keep him home from daycare a lot longer than we planned because of that, which is, that was a good thing. We got to see a lot more of his first. We also finished potty training the oldest one, who was 2.5 when the pandemic started. So we're potty trained. We're good to go now.
One of the cons would be it's very hard to work from home when you have little ones running around, especially when you're trying to have
virtual
meetings, and he's kind of like climbing over your shoulders and
and remind you we're potty training, so
right.
He's just in his underwear, so it's hard to. You cannot be on the camera right now, son.
And sometimes there just wasn't enough patience to go around.
With him or us.
Yeah.
Or Joel, the baby, so yeah.
And many times we'd have to divide and conquer. If she's on a Zoom call, I take him outside and we do stuff, and vice versa. And that also led to longer work hours, having to get up earlier to work
while they were still asleep.
While they're still asleep, and then working later after they go to sleep. So that kind of took away some of the personal time. So we have a lot of DVR shows to catch up on.
But yeah, overall it wasn't the most horrible thing, but it was a learning process that when we still work from home today, we're still trying to figure that out.
Yeah, and just know that when you pray to the Lord for more time, He'll give it to you.
Can we give it up for their stories? Weren't they great? Ain't nobody praying for time after that video, right? You got more than enough time. You were good. But I was listening to their stories. I was thinking about my story and seeing so many other parents. And today, I just want to give you 4 big thoughts on parenting. You can take it or leave it, but I think these 4 big thoughts are the biggest things that all of us have experienced during this time. And hopefully they can be an encouragement to you as you leave here today to take back into your homes, back with your kids, and be able to reconnect with them on a different level as we move forward in the midst of all that's around us. So here's the 4 big things I want to give you. The first one is this. The first thing I think we all have to be able to shift when it comes to parents is we have to shift your perspective and shift my perspective. I think a lot of us have lost perspective during this time when it comes to our parenting. And you know what's funny as we talk about parenting in church is I went through the Bible this week just front to back. I mean, I was looking for some great examples of parents in the Bible. I mean, I'm cruising through, trying to read a bunch of these stories, but you know what? There's not many great examples of parents in the Bible. There's no perfect, place to go to where you can find the perfect family to, emulate or example your life after. And so I just started looking in the front, like the very first humans that entered the earth, they were the ones who sinned and messed it up for all of us. And then there's another couple that comes on the scene. They have 2 boys. And guess what? The other son kills the other son right at the beginning of the Bible. And I'm like, man, this is not off to a good start, right? And then you go through and there's husbands with multiple wives and they're trying to figure that whole thing out. And then even Jesus' parents one day, they lose him. And they're trying to find him. He's off somewhere. How do you lose the Son of God, right? Like, that's a bad parenting move. But you know what I thought was great? is I found that to be very encouraging and uplifting as well, because if the Bible, God's story, doesn't have any great, perfect parents, well, guess what? You and I fit right in. I mean, we're just as dysfunctional as they were back then. All of us have some families that we can open up this book and relate to, because there is no perfect family. There is no perfect parent. All of us are trying to manage what God has given us the best that we can. And sometimes we're good, and sometimes we fall short. But if I've learned anything during this time about what it looks like to shift our perspective, is we have to, as parents, give ourselves some grace. Give yourselves some grace. It's going to be all right. Some days can be good and some days can be bad, and that is okay. It's not, you don't have to pretend to be perfect. I think so many parents, one of the couples alluded to it in the video, the idea that we see so many other parents and families on social media and online, and we quickly start doing the comparison game, don't we? Well, I'm not as good as them, or man, they're having a lot more fun than we are. Or, man, I would just like to get out of the house, but here they are. They're going to water country. Like all these things, they're trying to figure this out. And a lot of times it takes ourselves, we have to shift our perspective from trying to be perfect to just being open and willing to God to use us as parents. I love this verse. Romans 3:23-24 tells us this. It says, for all have sinned. Everybody say all. Guess what? You're included in that all. Me and you. All of us have sinned, and what? What do? We fall short. We fall short of the glory of God. But guess what? All are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that comes and came through Christ Jesus. So how cool is that? That you and I, we fall short. We mess up. But the cool thing is that God is right there with us. And that's why he sent his son for you and me. That we don't have to be perfect because his son was and showed us a better way. And so when we fall short, we can lean on his grace for comfort. We can lean on his grace for help in our time of need. And that's the cool thing about that. The next thing is, it's okay to show your humanity sometimes as well. I think as parents, we try to, be perfect in front of our kids and show them we got it all together. But sometimes showing our kids our humanity can be just as powerful. Because you know why? It shows us that we need grace and forgiveness too, just like they do. It shows them that we need to go to God for help, just like we're encouraging them to go to God for help. Our humanity shows them that, we may not be perfect, but at the same time, we need God just like they do. I remember I had a moment with my 4-year-old during this pandemic where it got kind of awkward. I was impatient. I was on my last nerve. And listen, my son has done such a good job during this time. He's had some speech therapy issues. He's been trying to learn how to talk more and more. My wife, I'm telling you, works so hard with him every single day to try to get him to talk. But the problem is now that he's getting better at talking, it's incredible to watch him speak now. But now he knows words that knows that it will drive mommy and daddy crazy. He learned the word why, okay? And he asked it after everything we say. It was really cute for the first 5 minutes. And then after that, it drives you insane. And I remember one day he just kept going, why, Daddy, why? And I just remember I was just like, because, Sawyer, just because. And I didn't, do anything wrong, but my tone was not nice. And I knew that I had blown it, and I could see him just kind of shrink back and be like, oh, okay, Dad, go take a minute for yourself. And so I was like, I went to my wife, and I was like, man, I'm sorry. I lost my patience. And I remember I had to go to my son and had to get awkward and say, hey, buddy, listen, that was not cool with Dad. I shouldn't have done that, and I apologize. Will you forgive me? And there is nothing more humbling than going before your children and asking for forgiveness for something that you've done. It's embarrassing. It doesn't feel good. But you know what my son got to see? My son got to see my humanity. But he also got to see that I was man enough to come to him and ask for forgiveness. And that's what we have to do sometimes. We have to be willing to give ourselves some grace, but also realize that we fall short and do something about it, to shift our perspective. And it's okay to show our kids our humanity. The next big thing I learned from this pandemic, and maybe you did too, is that we have to remember your influence. Remember your influence. And no matter where you are in the parenting game, you have influence. And it's very easy to forget that, especially because our relationship with our kids change so quickly. Jeff alluded to this when he was talking about it in the welcome. I mean, we go from newborns to toddlers to teenagers to grown adults going off to college to now parenting parents and then being grandparents. I mean, everything changes so fast. And sometimes we can feel like when the kids are younger, we're their heroes, right? Like we're perfect parents, they love us, they care for us, and then they turn teenagers and it's like they forgot all about us, right? And it's like, what happened? Don't you still love me? I still love you. I'm paying your bills, like I'm taking care of you. But we don't have that position in their lives like we used to. Parents used to be number one, and now we kind of find ourselves down 4 or 5 on the list with friends and mentors and coaches. And it feels like we lose our influence. But the thing is, hey, at least you're still number 4. Right? You still have influence. You may not be number 1 on the charts anymore, but you still have influence. They're still looking to you for wisdom and guidance and love, even when it feels like they're not. They still look to you for advice. They're still watching you no matter what. And because of that, we have to remember the influence that we have. I love this verse. It's Paul talking to a younger leader. His name is Timothy, and he gives them all these instructions about how he's supposed to live his life and do these things and teach these people. But I love here at the end of this verse what he encourages Timothy and what he says. He says this, be diligent in these matters, these things that I've taught you. Give yourself wholly to them so that everyone may see your progress. Watch your life and your doctrine closely. Persevere in them because if you do, you will save both yourself and your hearers. And what I love about these words is that it reminds us that we have people watching and seeing our lives. And so he's telling this young man, he said, listen, be on watch. Make sure you're putting into practice the things that I'm teaching you and that you're teaching other people. Make sure they're a part of your life because people are watching. Let's say it another way. Your kids are watching. Your kids are hearing you and seeing your every move. And like I said, we're not perfect. We do mess up from time to time, and we have to own those moments. But we have to realize we have influence. And because of that influence comes a responsibility for you and I to make sure that we're living the lives that God has created us to live. You and I have influence over our kids, and we need to be reminded of that because they're learning from us. I know even today, some 30 years later, my dad still has so much influence over my life, just like your parents still have influence over your life. And it's crazy the things that my dad can say or do that just bring so much peace and comfort to my life as a son. And it doesn't matter how old I get, he's still my dad. And he still has that influence in my life. And you, as a parent, every single one of you still have influence. No matter how much you feel like that influence is gone, it's still there. And so make sure we manage that well and understand that it exists. Next big thing that I've learned during this time is that we have to create healthy guardrails. We have to create healthy guardrails. Now, this is the one that's not as fun. But think about this. If you're going down the road, a windy mountain pass, all of a sudden you look over and there's no guardrails on the road. A storm starts coming, it gets really cloudy and foggy. You would quickly be very thankful to have those guardrails there, right, to keep you from falling off of that cliff. Well, the same thing is true when it comes to our parenting. Having guardrails in our kids' lives keeps them from falling off life's cliffs. And I know it sounds stupid. Sometimes we just want to be our kids' best friends, but guess what? You're not called to be their best friend all the time. You're called to be their parent. God put you in charge of their life as their father and mother to set healthy guardrails. Kids need their parents. And they may say they don't want guidelines, they don't want perimeters, they don't like any of those things. But I know for me, if I'm about to fall off a cliff, I'd want somebody to put something there to make sure that I don't do that. And so we have to communicate those guardrails with our kids. And then we have to set healthy consequences for those things when we get too close to those guardrails to keep us back in line. I remember my parents did this so well when I was younger and a teenager. There was this spot called the Downtown Mall where everybody hung out as teenagers. And I remember I wanted to go down there so bad. But my parents said, listen, you can go anywhere you want. You got your driver's license. You can hang out with your friends. But listen, you cannot go there to that one spot. And I remember going, why? And then my friend invited me to a concert there. And I'm like, Mom and Dad, I begged them. I said, Mom and Dad, please let me go down there. I just want to go down there and hang out with my friends. Their parents are going to be there, all of us. They said, Trey, no. That's one of the guardrails we set. I'm sorry. You're going to have to go to another concert somewhere else. And I remember being so mad at them for weeks going, man, I wish they would have let me go. My friends had so much fun. But what I found out weeks and then months and then years later, the friends that I was going to go to that concert with met some people down there that were not good for their lives, started pulling them in a wrong direction, and they started doing things and experiencing things that were never good for their life. And I looked back on that and go, wow, I'm so glad my parents told me to not go down there because it saved me in my life some damage in the future. And so parents, set healthy guardrails. Proverbs 13:24 tells us this: whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. Diligent to discipline him. And I remember reading this verse, and I'm like, whoa, that's a little harsh, right? There's some rods and there's some discipline, and like, what do we do with all that? But back in the day, we have to remember where this passage is from. The same way a rod was used to guide sheep who began to splinter away from the flock. This is what got them back together. It was also used as a defense mechanism to keep the sheep from the predators. And so the shepherds would use them. And so that's what a guardrail is. It's a rod. It's what keeps us in our parameters. And so parents, don't forget to do that, because here's from one of the books I was reading this week, here's what it shares. And I love this. It says, influential parents know how to seize relational opportunities and how to set clear boundaries and what? Stick to them. They understand that the merging of love, connection to their child, healthy boundaries, and discipline, when called for, result in maximum influence. And so when we set guardrails, we're actually setting ourselves up for more influence down the road because we're showing our children a better way to go. And so I know this one isn't fun. And I know, man, we are just in the part where our 4-year-old loves to test our boundaries, and it is great. But we're learning lots, and I hope that you will as well to set those healthy guardrails. And then lastly, number 4 is this: create a lasting impact. Lastly, the thing that I don't want us to forget as we leave here today is we have the opportunity to create a lasting impact. For me, I know a lot of you had a great time over the last few weeks and months getting out and doing different things together. I know some of you went picnicking, and some of you found some creative ways to have game nights and do things at home that you've never done before. And I remember for me growing up, my parents spent so much time creating memories with us. They took us camping. We had food fights in our kitchen. We would go out and do all these fun things together, and it was a great time. And those memories are lasting impacts in our lives, and I'm glad my parents did that. But you know what the most lasting impact that my parents brought us up in and taught us as I got older was not just to have fun, but the everlasting impact of a relationship with God. I know in high school, my parents switched. We started going to church. They started getting the help that they needed to get us the help we needed. And we'd show up together, and we'd go to church together. We start praying at meals together as a family. We allowed God to do things in our family that we never knew were possible. And for you, I hope that you create lasting impact and allow God to be a priority in your parenting. A lot of times we can put sports and other agendas and things before God, and then we miss out on teaching our kids what a godly relationship is all about and having that connection with God. And remember, they're watching and seeing you. And so what you make a priority, guess what? They're going to make a priority. Another verse, 1 Thessalonians 2, Paul, teaching to another church, says this: for you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children. And I love these words that he uses: encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God, who calls you into his kingdom and glory. I love this. This is what we can do with our kids, right? Listen, we can encourage them, we can comfort them, and we can urge them to live a life worthy of God, worthy of the life that God has given our children. I think about our kids' ministry and how each and every week all these kids show up, even my kids show up each week, and these parents and people are taking time out of their life to volunteer to teach our kids about God. How incredible is that we have such a great tool here at our church for our kids to grow. But guess what? You got to take them. You got to bring them. They got to experience it, and they got to model it, and you have to model it and see it from them. And I pray as you continue to do that, as you continue to urge them, comfort them, encourage them in a relationship with God, as they see it from you, they'll get to experience it for themselves as well. And remember how I told you never lose influence? So a few months ago, my dad brought my brother and I together and gave us a gift. And my dad's not a big gift giver, right? He's always been a great dad. He gives us gifts around the holidays and stuff. But for him just to say, hey, I just want to give you a gift is kind of a weird thing. So you kind of start wondering what it could be. And so he gives my brother and I each a box, and he asked us to open the box. And so we opened the box, and it was a watch. And I was like, Dad, listen, I'm not a watch guy. It's just not my style. And he's like, no. I got you this because of the words. I want you to read them. And so on the back of the watch read this. It says, my son, I closed my eyes, but for a moment, and suddenly a man stood where a boy used to be. I may not carry you on my back anymore because it would definitely hurt him, but I will always carry you in my heart. You've given me so many reasons to be proud of the man you have become, but the proudest moment for me is telling others that you are my son. Love, Dad. And I remember getting that gift from my dad, and my dad is fun. He jokes up all the time. He's full of all kinds of words. But in this moment, I've realized the impact and the influence that my dad had on me and how his words continue to matter in my life. And I need to remember every single day that I have the same influence over my boys. And I hope I don't keep my words to myself. I hope I don't keep my love to myself. I hope I continue to remember my influence and how I can encourage them and help them and be there for them no matter what age they become. Because we still have influence. We're still being able to use by God. You and I, we can create a lasting impact. We can create healthy guardrails. And we can renew our perspective today so that we can be the parents that God has called us to be. And so today, what do you need to do to be the parent that God's called you to be? Which one of these 4 things resonates with you today as a parent? And I pray whatever it is, that you wouldn't just leave it here, you would do something about it. And so if you're a parent in here today, I just want an opportunity to pray for you because the Lord knows we need it. And I pray that as you leave here today, that you're encouraged to continue to be the dad or the mom or the grandma or the grandpa or the aunt or the uncle or the mentor that you were created to be. Let's pray together. Jesus, I thank you so much for our time together today. Lord, I just pray for every single parent in this room and who's with us today online that, God, you would just continue to give them the strength and the courage and the love and forgiveness, God, to be the parents that you created them to be. And God, where we fall short, where we mess up, where we don't feel good enough or adequate, God, I just pray that we would lean on you for strength and that, God, you would give it to us. Lord, we love you. We thank you for being the father to us, Lord, that you've been. And we pray that we take that same influence and give it to our kids and that you would be with us every step of the way. We love you, we praise you, and we thank you for our time together today. And in your name we pray, amen. And everybody said, amen. Well, thank y'all for being here today. Can we got a hand for our time together today? Awesome. Well, hope you guys have a great Sunday, a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you back here next Sunday as we look at our next RelationShift. Have a great day.